There comes a moment in every life when the noise becomes too loud. The voices of the world, the endless expectations, the rush to become something, to prove, to win. You wake one morning and realize you have been running for so long that you have forgotten what silence sounds like. So you stop. For the first time in years, you simply stop. And in that pause, you hear it, a faint, living stillness beneath all the noise. Stillness. It's not the absence of movement, it's the mastery of it. It is the quiet at the center of the storm, the calm eye that never spins. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." He wasn't speaking of isolation or withdrawal. He was speaking of control, the kind that comes when the mind is finally ruled by reason, not by fear. We spend years trying to conquer the world, but few of us ever conquer our own restlessness. We fill the silence with music, screens, and motion because we're terrified of meeting ourselves. Yet, the man who cannot sit alone in quiet will never find peace, even in paradise. There was once a soldier who came back from war. He had seen the worst of men and the fragility of life. He was praised for his courage, but inside, he was haunted by the noise of memory, by the ghosts of battle. He tried to drown them in work, in company, in wine, but they followed him everywhere. One evening, he walked to the edge of a vast lake. The wind was still, the water mirrored the stars. He sat down, exhausted, and for the first time since the war, he closed his eyes and listened, to nothing. No orders, no shouts, no past, only breath, only silence. And there, at that edge of stillness, his fear dissolved, not because he fought it, but because he finally stopped feeding it. That is where freedom begins. Not in control of others, not in possessions, not in the absence of struggle, but in the still acceptance of what is. Epictetus taught, there is only one way to happiness, to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will. How many of your sleepless nights come from things you cannot control? How much of your life have you spent fighting the inevitable, arguing with the past, fearing a future that does not yet exist? Stillness does not mean surrender. It means understanding the difference between what you can change and what you must release. Fear thrives on reaction. It feeds on the movement of the mind. When you stop reacting, fear starves. It fades like fire without air. The wise know this. The strong practice it. To be still is to be untouchable. Not because life stops hurting you, but because you stop letting pain decide who you are. A man once asked a monk, "How do you find peace in a world like this?" The monk smiled and said, "By not allowing the world to live inside me." That is the secret. The world will always make noise, but you don't have to echo it. You can let the storm rage around you and yet remain unmoved. Stillness is strength disguised as surrender. It is the art of knowing when to act and when to simply observe. You cannot force the tide to turn, but you can learn to stand in the water without fear. Fear is movement, the mind reaching into tomorrow, grasping for safety. Freedom is presence, the mind resting entirely in now. When you master that shift, nothing can enslave you again. Think of the mountains. They face centuries of storms, yet they remain. The trees bend, the rivers flood, but the mountain stands still. Not because it resists, but because it simply is. That is stillness, to endure, not by force, but by understanding your nature. Many people confuse busyness with purpose. They think motion equals meaning. But motion without direction is the same as chaos. Stillness gives clarity. It's the Moment the dust settles and the truth appears. If you cannot stop, you cannot see. If you cannot see, you cannot understand. And if you cannot understand, you will forever fear what you do not know. When fear arises, don't run. Don't fight. Observe. Let it speak. Let it move through you, and you'll realize, it has no power but the one you give it. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the calm decision to keep walking while fear stands in your path. Every man must stand at that edge, the edge of stillness, where he faces everything he cannot control and says, "Do your worst. I remain." In that moment, you stop being the victim of life and become its student. Pain becomes a teacher, loss becomes a sculptor, time becomes an ally. Because in stillness, you stop fighting reality, and you start understanding it. The Stoics called this amor fati, the love of fate. Not resignation, but partnership. Not weakness, but wisdom. To love your fate is to realize that every challenge was never against you, but for you, to forge you into someone who can no longer be broken by fear. When you find stillness, you no longer chase peace, you become it. You no longer search for strength, you embody it. And the world, with all its chaos and uncertainty, loses its power to shake you. You walk through storms as if through a garden, because your roots are deeper than the weather above you. Remember this: stillness is not retreat. It is readiness. It is the sharpened calm before every right decision, the silent confidence before every act of courage. The man who can be still when all others panic is already free. He has nothing left to prove, because he finally understands that his worth was never tied to the noise of the world. One day, you will sit alone, far from the screens and voices, and you'll hear a sound you haven't heard in years, the sound of your own soul, steady and quiet, like a river flowing beneath the surface. That is you, without fear. That is you, unshaken. And in that quiet recognition, you will realize the thing you were searching for was never out there, it was waiting in the silence within you. This is the edge of stillness, where fear ends and freedom begins. So when the world shouts, don't shout back. When fear rises, don't run. Breathe, observe, be still, because the man who owns his stillness cannot be owned by anything else. He becomes the mountain, the calm in the storm, the unshaken mind. He walks through life untouched, not because life has become easy, but because he has become wise. Stand at the edge of stillness, and you'll see, there is nothing left to fear.